What is the forgotten adoption option? Many are aware of infant international adoption, where you hire an agency, often wait a long time, and spend tens of thousands of dollars. And then there's becoming a foster parent, where you may or may not adopt the children. But there is a third option, where you adopt children directly from the foster care system. I call this the forgotten adoption option. In fact, 30% of children currently in foster care are adoptable, and you don't need to be a traditional foster parent to adopt them. Hi there, I am Marcy Bursack. After blogging my experience adopting a pair of biological siblings through the foster care system, people started asking me to explain the process to them. And it's difficult to navigate, but the families I mentor feel that knowing the barriers, the challenges, and what to expect has actually helped them persevere and pursue their dream of adopting. And while I would love to have a really big family, adopting thousands of children isn't exactly realistic, but I can teach others how. Whether you're trying to figure out how to get started, you're battling some doubts and fears, or maybe you know someone who wants to adopt, I'm here with resources to help others discern if foster care adoption is the path for them. And if it is, I have practical tips and resources for them as well. You can find all of these resources, which include my blog, 3 books, an app, and a classroom lesson at forgottenadoptionoption.com. However you found this podcast, I am so glad that you did. I want to extend an invitation to you to reach out to me to ask anything on your heart. My goal is to help every waiting child be in their forever family. And that's why I host this podcast. Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. In this episode, we will discuss core issues in adoption and permanency. When the movie Instant Family came out, my heart probably squealed inside of me with excitement because I knew the content was going to be powerful in conveying the story of foster care adoption, specifically because I saw in the trailer that the story centers on a family adopting a sibling group of 3 children through the foster care system. So my friend Thea from Adoption Share, you might remember her. She was a season 3 guest. She connected me with Allison. So hey, Allison.
Hi, Marcy. Happy to be here.
Oh my goodness. I think if you feel just feel your energy through your voice, it's wonderful. Allison Davis Maxon is a nationally recognized expert in the fields of both child welfare and children's mental health. So you want to stay for this whole episode. There's such good information in this. She specializes in attachment, developmental trauma, and permanency and adoption. She co-authored a book titled 7 Core Issues in Adoption and Permanency, a guide to promoting understanding and healing in adoption, foster care, kinship families, and third-party reproduction. She's also the executive director of the National Center on Adoption and Permanency, and she was the foster care consultant, cool stuff here, for the Paramount Pictures movie Instant Family. So she was involved in the story of all of this coming together and being so real. And fun fact, Allison was honored in 2017 as the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute's Angels in Adoption Award, which I also received in 2022. So we have this cool commonality. We're both angels in this space, which is cool.
We're sister angels.
We are.
I love this.
I love it. It's a neat factoid. So Allison, I think the place to start is how does Allison end up in child welfare and in the children's mental health space? What brought you here?
Yeah, it really was one of those kind of it was unplanned in every way. Really, when I got out of graduate school, I knew I wanted to go into therapy and kind of sharpen my clinical wheels. Fresh out of graduate school, and I needed my clinical hours, my interning hours. And the first job I got was with children that were in residential treatment, i.e. foster care, but they couldn't live in families safely for many reasons. So they were in residential. So then I landed my first day on the job thinking I knew something, Marcy, I just read a lot of books in graduate school.
I know all these things. Yeah.
On the first day, these children chewed me up and spit me out. And I went home literally in tears. I felt it was so humbling. I thought I knew something. I felt like I didn't read any. I was almost assaulted on the first day. On the first day, kiddos chasing me with a pool stick, calling me names, really trying to hurt me. And it was my fault. I had triggered this very intense abuse reactive moment. And I went home humbled in every way. Now I was very young, very clinically untrained. I did know it was my fault, but I had no idea I went, are these, and most of us parents that end up in the world of adoption through foster care get like, how can like our children have survived so many things. I remember I questioned when I went home, I'm like, are these real children? Like, these are children, right? These are children. Because they acted unlike any children I'd ever been around. And that was my own naivety. I went, so what's happening here? And it thrust me into this world, which became my career and field around attachment and developmental trauma and understanding the deep wounds that children carry inside their hearts, their minds, their bodies, and how it changes them. And then how we as the grown-ups have to open up spaces of healing. But that's on us. So none of this came easy for me. So those folks that are like, oh, it's Allison and she knows a lot. I'm like, oh no, I for 10 years got, chewed up and spit out and had to earn that through all these children, right, that I
Yeah,
worked with.
but to me, I'm going, you went back. Like, why on earth did you go back to work? Like, I think I'm thinking me in that scenario, I think I would have gone home and cried. And I think I would have questioned, am I even in the right field? How much time have I spent getting educated to do a job that I'm not even like I'm not even appreciated for who I am? How did you get the like gumption to go back to work day two?
Marcy, I feel like, and have kept this mantra, like I do feel like our real learning begins when we start our own unlearning. Like all the conditioning of what we think we know about ourselves or the world, or it should be this way or that, like we are very conditioned. And we all have these biases that we buy into or these ways of being. And I had to uncondition and unlearn to open myself up to relearn. And really what I was learning, and I was just a good student, what I was learning would be from these children. I would be learning from them about their wounds, their needs, their healings, and what they needed from me. So I couldn't have done it if I hadn't, and it took a long time to unlearn. And I think a lot of parents can resonate with that, like, oh, wait a sec. I'm the parent. I already know everything. And if you haven't parented a deeply wounded, attachment impaired child, you have no idea what that's like until you're in the trenches with them. And you're not going to read that from a book. You actually have to live in that trench for a bit to go, whoa, I'm a bit over my head. It's why things like this, Marcy, are so helpful for parents so they can feel like, oh, I can say anything and you're not going to judge me, or you're like, they need these spaces where they can talk about their journey and how hard it is for them.
Wow. So it sounds like in some sense you sort of knew this was coming, like that you were going into work that was challenging. So it's sort of like, even though it was hard and took a whole lot of humility and a whole lot of relearning and unlearning, you sort of kind of knew. Is that fair to say? Like you kind of knew that this was part of the work.
I did. I feel like for me, that's also part of my essence. It's just this,
Hmm.
it's part of me. I'm a pretty kind of tenacious and, I don't do anything easy. Like, if it's like, oh, there's Mount Everest, like, yeah, we're going to, of course, climb that. Like, why would we not climb that? Like, there's been so many things in my own life where, if there's an easy way or the bigger way, I'm usually going to go which all these children really were and this is still the work that I love and I'm deeply passionate about.
And you endured, and look at, wow. Okay. There's like so much in here because you stayed with something hard, you pursued something hard, you've brought such, what I'm going to say is life and like freedom and just wonderful things we're going to get to. So you're in Los Angeles and you also have a therapy practice. Can you tell us, so your therapeutic work, what area of focus do you particularly work in?
Yeah, my clinical specialization is around complex developmental trauma, which is really childhood trauma. This thing called attachment, but attachment inside family systems. So every parent parenting our kids gets that. Attachment is always in play and always more complex when you're parenting a child that's not from you or of you biologically, that's not homegrown, didn't grow in you or from your own genetics. Because for the child, they have more losses. These are profound losses. So as those losses surface, attachment becomes more complex. Typically doesn't become easier. It becomes more challenging. So it's why specializing in this arena, and it's, what I call the trifecta, which is really my specialization, which is the complex developmental trauma, which is like, think of, Marcy, like a three-legged stool. So there's one leg, the complex developmental trauma, which is childhood trauma, different than adult trauma because the self is already built. Identity's not built. Think young brains, think, okay, that's complex developmental trauma, one leg of the stool. Second leg of the stool is attachment. Everything in my world is attachment. So those two things are dependent on each other. So the lack of attachment, i.e., extreme neglect, can create developmental trauma. So you can see those two legs are always interacting and can create impairments for a young human. And then the third leg of that stool is permanency and adoption. So think kinship, foster care, adoption, like all those challenges that create more losses over the lifespan. That these issues tend to not end because search and reunion and identity formation. And so all these core issues that we can talk more about, which actually are pretty complicated for young humans, that this lives inside of them. It's lived experience. It's not easy for outsiders to really understand, or easy for young kids to even understand. They have trouble articulating often because there's not a lot of self-awareness or self-reflection. I mean, kids are just having a childhood when all these pretty big, profound losses are happening in their lives. So the three-legged stool and me working inside of often the whole family. So I never just see a child because it's almost a waste of time. Always seeing the whole family because the family is the healing mechanism for a child with the three-legged stool. So I don't need to get attached to your child. That doesn't help your child. My goal is to always strengthen and deepen those primary attachment connections, which can be very tricky when developmental trauma and permanency and adoption are in play, right? Did I explain that kind of well so we get the...
Yeah, there's the three pieces there. And I'm curious because one thing you hit on was neglect. And I've heard this, I don't know if this is true. I've heard that the wound of neglect is a deeper one than one of abuse. Would you agree with that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Rule of thumb, like if we're just talking kind of black and white, that's a yes. Especially profound early neglect when year one of human life, year two of human life, year three of human life, those needs aren't met through primary attachment, serve, and return. Critical brain structures, think our sensory-based internal system, doesn't become matured and integrated, really has devastating effects. It's why we don't have kids housed in orphanages, babies in orphanages anymore, where you have rotating caregivers, and those earliest years when our brain is really forming its core structures. And I mean, core structures
though,
around,
it's kind of like recording it all. It's all the same. Yeah.
Well, this is where we learn regulation, like internal regulation, how to self-soothe, how to build basic trust that humans are loving versus I'm scared of all humans because my system gets overwhelmed or my nervous system gets overwhelmed because I'm hyper aroused because my early needs weren't met. So neglect has devastating, especially long-term neglect, because you have so many unmet needs for that young human. I mean, developmental and attachment needs that go unmet.
I appreciate you sharing some context on that because I know when we're dealing with children who've been impacted by the system, sometimes it's a mix of those things and sometimes it's an extreme of either. And so I think it's helpful for folks to understand that this requires quite a bit of intentionality and empathy and understanding. And I love how you pointed out when your role with the families you're working with is not for the child to attach with you, right? That you're trying to help the child attach their family and you're just kind of facilitating that and really helping through that healing journey. And so you've created a resource that also has a workbook for both parents and children and teens. And I'm curious if you can tell us about your 7 core issues in adoption and permanency kind of work. And I think we can get it on Amazon. I've seen it there. Tell us more.
Yeah, great. Well, the first book, which is really the big book, which really is a pretty intense read, and I highly recommend it because the more informed any parent or professional is about these core issues, especially if you haven't lived them. So even our adoptive parents or our foster parents, Marcy, most of them aren't adopted or didn't grow up in foster care. So they don't have an internal experience of what this is like. So the tendency is to minimize those losses. And I don't mean we do it on purpose. We just go like, well, they have us now. So, all of those 7 disruptions that you had, or those 6 different moms or moves, or, you know, the tendency is to minimize that. And again, it's not intentional, but it's just what happens. It's the denial of those profound losses, or the minimizing of those losses, that block grief and loss and the healing parts of the experience. So we really want parents and professionals to understand the core losses for children, which can create feelings of rejection and abandonment and shame and identity confusion, identity bewilderment, and blocked grief. Kids get really angry. We have some kids that are angry all the time. That's just blocked grief. Those are losses that haven't been processed. And children don't do that alone. They don't do it in isolation. That's why I always work in families. I'm like, oh no, parents, you're going to be in here and we're going to do some really deep, intensive work, because this child needs to be able to bring their pain and their suffering and their losses to you, which can be very healing for the whole family. So the 7 core issues in adoption and permanency, which is a conceptual framework that really helps us understand the child, the teen, the adult adoptee's losses over the lifespan, because these losses aren't just when you're small. They unfold through each developmental stage. Often the hardest stage, Marcy, which I think is often surprising for many parents, even if they adopt at birth, will be adolescence, because identity formation is now on the front burner, and kids have to figure out who they are, build their own identity on top of all these losses. They have to reprocess the trauma and figure out who they are when they might be missing critical parts of their own history, lineage, culture, identity. So both workbooks, and then we did 2 workbooks that really are, one is built exclusively for parents because parents have their own journey, right? Did you know parents have identity? We have parental identity. Like
Ooh.
we have a mom identity and a father identity. We have a belief system about myself as a mother, how I feel about me as a mother. Do I feel like I'm doing a good job? Do I feel like I have to be perfect to be worthy? Do I feel like my child should receive my love all the time? Because lots of times our kids don't open their hearts up to our love. So we wrote something really to help parents on their journey, not deny their own needs or their own losses, because many of our parents have their own losses in this journey. And the second workbook, or the one that I just finished last year, is really the workbook that's built for children and teens. The first half is for children, and it is a workbook, so it's built for parents and professionals to be able to use with young kids, about why does my family look different, or why do I get asked all these questions, and what feelings get triggered when people ask me these questions, and and they're all very kid friendly. The teenage part, which was really fun to do, all my teenagers helped me with it, has 7 chapters for each of the 7 core issues, and is very teen friendly, helping teens explore and understand all of these more challenging issues that maybe they've been denying or trying to repress for a long time. So that's like a 5-minute quick snapshot around all 3 of
Yeah.
those resources.
And I think something that stuck out to me, and we kind of hit on this a little bit before we started recording, but I love your involvement in, while you're helping to, and you just said this even with like, okay, in the sessions, it's you helping the family, but even as you're talking about, as you're creating things, it's so informed and involved and co-created with the families and the children that you're helping and the teens. And it's not just like, I went to school, I'm gonna like hypothesize and theorize, and that's just so incredible to get their involvement and to make sure it's relevant and practical.
It's impossible without it, Marcy. I'm so glad you picked up on that, because all my teens, they were more excited about this workbook coming out. Like, when's it coming out, Allison? When's it coming? Because I had all these teens helping with the verbiage and in fact, they tell me when something looked too hokey, like that doesn't look hip enough, Allison, like it needs to look like this, or it was really fun. And then with my parent workbook, trying all the activities, because it really is a tool for parents to be more reflective about their own attachment history. What are my triggers? Because we all have those deep emotional triggers. What is that belief system about myself in this role, or about children? Or what are the attachment strengths I don't have? And how can I practice some of those? Those are all baked into the workbook. It's actually very digestible, and it's a tool you can implement right away. Like you can, in fact, there's a piece at the end. It's called The 10 Things Your Child Needs to Hear from You. And these are messages that your child needs, not from your mouth, but from your heart space into their heart space. And so often our children aren't getting these deep messages. And it goes back to what you were saying, Marcy, because parents aren't able to, one, sometimes get beyond the behaviors. We get stuck on behaviors, but get there within themselves to that deeply loving place, and that unconditional love and acceptance for who our child is in this moment, not sometimes withholding our love till they act a little better or stop doing all the behaviors that they're doing, when really it is our unconditional love and acceptance of them in this moment that often is that healing element. So these messages are so powerful. In fact, when I do them often together with kids and families in the same room, in fact, I had a session last week where I did this with a father and a son, just the father and the son. Son was adopted at the age of 3. We only got to the first 2, a whole hour, and we just got to 2 because the child's response to what the dad was saying, and then the dad's, it was the first time the son said he'd ever seen his dad real emotion for him, like his deep feelings for him, because dad got very emotional as he started reading these 2 things. And this is what's so important, to make sure that we're deepening and strengthening attachment. These are such healing messages for a child that's experienced abandonment or abuse or trauma or neglect or sexual trauma, right? These are such important messages. So really empowering parents with the tools they need to become therapeutic parents, right? It's just, I can't heal your child, but I'm always like, I can open up a path to help you get there with your child.
That's incredible. So what it really sounds like, because Allison, I know I don't live in California with you. I'm like across the country in Missouri. What it sounds like you've done is you've sort of given all of us as parents, or even other therapists, the opportunity to use exercises, activities, dialogue, all the things, all the tools that you use. And I can see this really amazing space that I got to see last time we spoke, where you're providing and doing this with families. We can do this now ourselves. You're
Yes.
giving us all of that, which is incredible, because I know there's some like weird rules about therapy and like what state you can be in and what state I can, all that stuff, right? But instead, we have the tools that are available. I'm so excited about this. And I remember when my husband and I, we adopted our children. We finalized the adoption when they were 4 and 5, but that process takes a bit of time. So we were together like 18 months before all of that. But I remember someone telling us early on, around the age of 10 or 12, which sounds like you called it adolescence, kind of around then, that there would sort of be like an identity crisis for them. And it's been interesting as parents to tell them that, like, their entirety of their childhood, like, hey, you're totally normal when this happens. And it has. And I'm so grateful that, like, in addition to knowing that's a reality, you have these tools that help us as parents and caregivers to really help guide our children, which is so cool. I'm very excited. And so pivoting topics slightly, this is a really interesting topic to me. So you're doing your therapy practice. Allison's like helping the world and like making a really big difference in foster care and children in the foster care system. And so one day you get a phone call from Sean Anders, the director of Instant Family, inviting you to help with research on his film, like out of the blue. And on your website, you share a few candid video clips about your reaction, which I love. And I wonder, say 5-10 years ago, did you have any idea that all of your kind of persistence and passion and effort in this field for children in foster care would ever be helpful to producing a film?
Not in 1,000 gazillion years, Marcy. Never, ever had I seen something that big landing on my path. Right. In fact, when he first called, and this was in 2015, it might have been 2016. The movie didn't come out till late 2018. And, I have been the executive director at Kinship Center for many years, and you feel these calls about, hey, we're doing a reality show on search and reunion or birth parents or making the, and I just always would say no, 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 no. When Sean called, in that initial call, I sat and I Googled him. I'm looking him up, like who's this guy? Is he legit? Because one, he sounded legit. And then I looked him up and he'd done Daddy's Home and he'd written scripts. And my one big question was, because I never wanted, if I was going to be a part of anything this big, he'd have to have lived the experience. Like that was just really important to me to have someone that wasn't just doing it from the outside in. So when he said, my wife and I adopted a sibling set of three kids from foster care, and, I never intended to write anything about it, but, my friends keep saying like, you got to take your storytelling skills to the world. One, it could make a difference for so many kids in care, which is what I got excited about in that initial call was if we can put the foster care to adoption narrative on the national radar, Marcy, that's what I want. It frustrates me that so many people are just kind of blind to foster care, like or blind to child welfare. Like it's our children in group homes and residential treatment centers across this nation feel invisible. They feel like people don't see them. They don't care about them. They're just a part of some government system, which is how they often feel when they're in a system. I've had 10 social workers. I've had 8 different placements. I'm in the next group home, and they're just rotating in a big bureaucratic system, feeling unseen, unvalued, unloved, and it's unconscionable. So when this opportunity fell in my lap, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm the perfect person. I did feel that in the moment. I'm like, I'm so glad because I'm gonna lean in and do my best. And we had been writing the book at the same time. So all the core issues, by the way, from the parent's journey to be like, oh, we got this. You've probably seen the movie, like when the parents are like, oh, it's the first week and we got this. And we're like, oh, you
My
just
brain
wait.
is exploding to know that those were in parallel. I didn't know that detail. Wow.
Right, right. And by the way, the support group scenes are my support group because I do a support group of parents. So to take all the parents' stories that also felt really real, right? All the stereotypes and the arc of those characters and that moment where they're on their bed and the whole house is melting down and everybody's yelling and screaming and losing their minds and they're like, how do we give them back? Like, we're overwhelmed. We can't do it. And in those parents have those real moments where their parents aren't being bad parents, they're being overwhelmed parents in crisis. They're in crisis in that moment. We wanted all those real moments of parental insecurity and feeling like I am over my head. I gotta call the troops in, like I need some backup here. I need some help here. So for me, it was this great opportunity to put this on the national narrative. So it's kind of a call to action. Like if you can't foster, if you can't adopt, because not everybody's built for that, right, Marcy? Like they're not, that
Exactly.
everybody could do something, right? You could bake cookies for the local group home. You could volunteer at the next, group home event or adoption celebration, or you could donate backpacks, or, you could donate funds or throw an event at your house. You could do so many things to help kids not feel invisible in their own communities. And it takes all of us. I'm a big believer in everybody could do something.
That's such a heavy. I want to like sit with your terminology of they feel invisible in their own community. One of my board members is adopted, and when I was trying to put a name to the work that I'm doing, we went through all sorts of different iterations, and we ended up on the forgotten adoption option because of exactly what you're mentioning with feeling like it's we don't talk about it. It's kind of buried, kind of dismiss it, and it's interesting to hear your voice, right? To me, I'm hearing it echo the voice of all the kids that you've worked with that have said, like, Allison, I feel invisible. Like, Allison, no one cares. Like, Allison, why am I stuck in going through all of this? And it feels like no one cares. That's a heavy statement. It's a very, very heavy statement.
And very real. And for me, I have heard it, probably hundreds of times, and mostly from our kids that get stuck in residential and congregate care. And some states do a better job than others around this issue in particular, but still, most states have very large numbers of kids in group homes, some that get abandoned into group homes, some that have failed adoptions or what we call adoption estrangement, where parents put them in residential and don't go back for them. So, and by the way, I never blame parents. Often I just blame us, the helping professionals, for not providing the right kind of therapy, because I'm really picky about this one, Marcy. Therapy for the sake of therapy is just about dog do. That's a clinical term, by the way.
It's so
If
clean.
it's so clear, like you know what I mean. Like a therapist are a dime a dozen. You need one that should sound like Allison. And if your therapist doesn't know trauma, attachment, and the core issues, they're not going to be as helpful as they can be, not just to your child, but to your whole family. And, the family is the healing element. Parents in the primary attachment is the healing element for children with attachment wounds. But we have to do a better job at meeting parents where they are. Because us parents have our own stuff. We have a childhood history of neglect or whatever we went through. We might have high ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, right? That we have an internalized attachment style and pattern. And that's what gets activated on our attachment dance floor. So the more we can self-reflect and be in awareness as to our triggers, the more we can attune to the needs of our child. And our kids have a ton of unmet needs.
So good. Okay, there's two questions that stemmed out of what you just said. The first one was you mentioned some kids are in group homes, use different A words. You said three different scenarios. The two that stuck out to me were abandonment and estrangement. What's the difference?
Um, Abandonment, and for me, when I think about abandonment trauma, this is often a word used by young adults. I do an adoptee support group, by the way, an adult adoptee support group. Abandonment trauma can be the wound that adult might be using to capture the constant despair and loneliness from never having closeness, like abandoned from everyone. So I might feel abandoned by my birth first parents, by my birth first family. Like I didn't have a grandma, I didn't have anyone that really attached or claimed my needs, because claiming is also really important. But if they then went into foster care and had 8 different mothers, they might feel a lot of abandonment trauma because none of those mothers held on to me. And that's an important part of it. So all of us need to have relational permanency, attachment permanency. Like you're going to hold on and not let go, right? Even when I misbehave or I act up, or even when I launch to college. It's why getting abandoned into a group home or a residential treatment center, or experiencing adoption estrangement, which is my family adopted me, but I don't see them anymore. It feels like they abandoned me,
I
or that
see.
there's an estrangement, right? And sometimes these attachment ruptures, and I'm working with a family right now around this issue. It's an adult child that was adopted, but they haven't talked in a year and a half. We do rupture. That's part of the attachment process. Doing the reparation work to bring all the parents and the child back and do the reparative work is what I'm often helping the adult parents be doing, even with an adult child, doing the reparations so that child's not left in this deepening of their own wound because they already have abandonment from the birth first family. So to have an adoption estrangement, I can't even tell you, it's like the wound on top of the wound on top of the wound. It is just so difficult to address and heal within yourself. So I'm always really wanting to help give parents hope that they can actually work through this estrangement and do the deep repair that will help even their adult child.
It's super layered. Wow. Wow. And then the other piece that I'm wondering is you were talking about, if we're looking for a therapist to help us in this space, we want them to sound like you, but like I mentioned earlier, very aware that there's weird state rules and they just are what they are right now, right? And so
Right.
I'm curious, Allison, I know some other folks like Karen Purvis in the Connected Child, her work is often discussed in this space. And I believe there's even like her acronym, like you can find like therapists that are trained in that. Can we find people that are trained? in your area that help
Yes,
you?
you can. Yes, you can absolutely. And this is where you do want to make sure when it's why I kind of explained the trifecta and the three-legged stool in the way that I did. Because even someone saying, well, I'll work with your child and I worked with an adoptee a year ago, so I know what I'm doing. That would not be enough for me because I want all three legs of that stool. Otherwise, you might be leaving the parent outside of the therapeutic relationship and the therapeutic process, Marcy, is very emotionally intimate. And if I'm that parent, by the way, I always put myself in a parent's shoes. By the way, I have four kids, right? So I know that parenting role. I don't want anyone knowing my child better than I know my child. Like what's happening in in this space, I want the parents to come into. Sometimes I might have to work with a teen a little bit before I can get them to the place where I can invite mom in or invite dad in but I can almost always get them there. And parents need to be here because otherwise we can't really do the deep reparation work because our kids do have abandonment trauma. They do have adoption trauma, these very deep, enduring wounds that often hit their sense of self-esteem and self-worth. I feel bad about me because my first family didn't want me, might be how they think about that, or because I was abused by my birth father, or, the feelings of very low esteem um, can permeate them and to feel like I don't know how to get close to my new family or my new parents because I'm in fear of getting too close because closeness hurts, right? Getting too close hurts because you might leave me too, right? So attachment's almost always in play for our kiddos.
We really need to be doing it together so that we can attach together, right? It's kind of all full circle what you said. So I know that you have a practice, lots of experience in this space, lots of research, lots of tools. You do a lot of conferences and coaching parents who've adopted children. I'm curious because many of our listeners have maybe already traveled that path like I have, and we're kind of in the middle of the raising of the children. And some are thinking like, can I really do this, right? Can I really adopt children through foster care? I'm curious, how would you encourage us kind of where we are, knowing what you know, and kind of going back to the very beginning, like you endured some really hard things very early on, and there's so much behavior pieces here that can be challenging.
Yeah. Um, I'm probably one of the most optimistic, hopeful people I know. So any parent considering, I want them considering and considering more and more and more. I think the biggest asset a parent can bring to this journey, and you do want to look at it like it's a journey. Like you're going to learn a lot the first year, the first 5 years, the first 10 years. My hope is you're always learning, that you're a learning being, that you're curious about self, that you're open to learning, including sometimes the own healing we need to do within ourselves. Because sometimes we think, oh, I'm already perfect. I don't have things to to work on or explore, but we have our own kind of embedded history of things that might be outside of our own awareness. So a parent that has a growth mindset, that is just willing to keep growing, to keep learning, to keep leaning into the hard parts, exploring what's difficult, especially within themselves. Like if I'm a parent that's angry all the time, that's me, by the way. That might be, I have blocked losses. I might have blocked grief. I might have hurtful things that I'm saying to myself in my head, shaming things, because maybe I had a critical parent that would demean me, and that's not my child's fault. That's just something I need to explore within myself, so I'm not triggered all day long by a 5-year-old that doesn't know how to attach. So I'm always wanting, it's actually what our parent workbook was really built to in a very, very parent-friendly, strengths-based way. So if you don't have a therapist that knows enough, give them either my parent book or my child and teen workbook, because that is a step-by-step guide that the professional can use to use a family systems attachment orientation to kind of do what I'm kind of referring to here around that family being the healing mechanism, right? But often we need those tools in our hand or we're not going deep enough is often what I find. I've been doing this 30 years, so I really don't expect anyone to always sound like Allison, but that's why wrote the books and have them out there in the professional world and for parents so they can go, oh, I'm struggling with anger today or losses today or shame or my child's dysregulated behavior or, what's the tool that I need today? And they're really specific and very tangible because I'm all about getting to behavior change.
So good. Okay, so we're all very curious then, Allison, as we close. Where do we find your books? Where do we find you? How do we learn more?
Yeah, well, I have a website, AllisonDavisMaxon.com. I have some videos and articles when I have time to post. I do all that. All of my books are available on Amazon. All 3 books are on Amazon. Any parents that are listening and start to use the workbooks, I definitely need reviews. So if you're using it and using some of the tools, please go in and write those reviews because one of the things we're working on right now at NCAP, the National Center on Adoption and Permanency, is a curriculum. And it really does help because basically the books are structured to be like a cheat on a curriculum. So the reviews will help us get the funding we need to create some of what we're working on the next few years. Fingers crossed.
That's exciting to know. So
I know,
really, it sounds like what you did is and I love this because I'm in the tech space by day is like my paid work. So you took what you could and you brought it to life, realizing, using your own words, it's not perfect, but it can get us started and moving forward, right? Like you didn't give us everything you could because you needed to get us started. I'm just so proud of you, Allison, that you're like, okay, so now that we started somewhere and we've got feedback, we can build on what we learned. And I hope if anyone's listening I know this has kind of been like true in my life right now, and maybe that's why I'm saying it out loud, but like in the entrepreneurial space where you're doing something that's never been done before or just trying, like Allison, you're such a living testament of like, just go try, like just see what happens, see what you can learn, ask for input. So really excited for the work that you're doing. So grateful for the tenacity that you have in this space, Allison. I just want to give you a really big thanks from so many families that are, you might never get to know our names, but we're listening and we're touched by the work that you're doing. And we're so grateful for the things that you're putting words to and equipping us to connect with our kids. So thank you so, so much.
I'm back at you, Marcy. I appreciate what you do. And really, I think, like I said early when we first got on, all of our voices across this nation to keep elevating so our kids and our teens don't feel invisible. Like the more we keep bringing light into this dark space where our kids feel unworthy and, the foster care to prison pipeline is alive and well for all of these hideous reasons. So it's why I'm deeply passionate about, kids grow best in families, but us professionals have to provide the resources and support that our families need. And I mean, our unique families. So we have to know a lot about that 3-legged stool, right? Or else the failure's on us, not on parents or families.
Listeners, did you know that you've helped the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast rank in the top 30% most followed podcasts on Spotify? You are helping waiting children be seen, and you're teaching our nation how to adopt these children. You can help this podcast reach more future adoptive parents by leaving a review and continuing to share this podcast with others. You can even help others know that instead of Googling to try to figure out how to adopt, they should go to ForgottenAdoptionOption.com where they can learn the step-by-step process, tips for enduring the journey, and I even have a children's book to celebrate the forever families all around us. It means so much that you took the time to listen to this episode. And on behalf of the 113,000 children who each has a name, a story, and dreams, and deserves to grow up experiencing the love and support that is found in a forever family, I thank you so much for caring.